And tensions remain high at the Electricity Company of Ghana as the workers there remain at loggerheads over plans by management to realign staff positions. Hundreds of workers who left the ECG to work with power distribution services have returned following the collapse of the PDS deal. The confusion is over management's decision to reverse promotions obtained by the staff that remained with the ECG at the time of the PDS deal. In a petition to the board, the aggrieved workers said the decision was a breach of the labor law. In the studio with us is Ben Arthur, labor consultant who has been looking keenly at the issues. Mr. Arthur, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me as well.
It's great to have you here. Now, you've been looking at this issue since it started. What really is the problem that is happening?
Yeah, thank you for having me, and good afternoon to our viewers as well. I wouldn't want to see it as a problem. I think that it's an occasion for transformation. We have not had some of these issues for long, where there's emergence, and then all of a sudden the emergence is no longer, in existence. So how do we handle workers? But for me, the key issues, which if we want to label it as a problem, is what could occur if some of these tensions are not deadened or resolved. These individuals are in the workplace, what we call utilities, and we classify them as essential service workers. What it means is that when there is any impasse, it has to be resolved within the shortest possible time. So for me and for those listening, what we're looking out for is, can this degenerate into the level where it can lead to power outages and the rest? Can it affect our power distribution and supply or whatever? So these are issues, and I think that we have to get it resolved in such a way that people will not be aggrieved, go on strike for us to pay, the consequences. The other issue that I think we need to also delve into is the industrial relations practice. Management has the option of making sure that there is a peaceful settlement of these issues. Actually, those promotions have not been reversed, but there has been an intention expressed to the workers of the reversals. But if you look into their collective bargaining agreement, if you also look at the processes through which the workers who were retained with ECG had been promoted, they had gone through due process, they have earned their positions and the rest. If you also look at the labor laws, you cannot make anybody's position worse off. So even if those particular positions are no longer in existence, it's their titles and tasks that could change. But obviously not their levels and their benefits. So these are issues that I think management must not rapidly go and reverse them. They need to sit down with this staff and iron some of these issues out. The last case that for me is the biggest of all that is happening is, I do not understand why a general secretary, it's not an accusation, it's a fact, of Public Utility Workers Union, PUU, would like to side with the management of employers for the ECG staff, dissolving their local union without any election. These executives had been elected. So if you are writing to dissolve their union, definitely you have to go through an election. Let those who elected them say that we no longer want this local union to exist. You don't simply just write and say that I have dissolved you. It was an act to break the front of the workers. And we are talking about 60 workers in all out of 112 who were made to stay with ECG. So when it comes in small bit and pieces like this, sometimes we don't look at the issues as very sensitive. But if you remember the STS deal, it started like this, but at the end of the day, no single house was built. So we need to look at these issues and ensure that the proper channels have been used, the right things have been done.
A number of things you touched on there. In the first place, you believe that this could possibly degenerate into industrial action, which could affect power supply to homes?
Oh yeah, it happens all the time. It can be 2 people, it can be 3, it can be 4. You see, workers act as nucleus. When I say nucleus, they can affect. It's like bushfire. They can affect others. They are in constant communication. In fact, when you are talking about 60 people, there are many people. In some workplaces, you don't have 60 people. And these are people who are in management positions, people who are engineers and the rest. You don't want to do that
What kind of effect can they have?
Can the workers have?
Yes.
Oh, definitely. I do not preempt that they should get angry and one day put our power off. But the necessary channels must be used. For example, if you do not allow workers to enjoy their benefit, they get demotivated. And sometimes you might be paying them, but they might pretend to work. So it affects motivation and productivity. And consequently, we, the consumers, can be paying for it.
So, Mr. Arthur, you also mentioned that they can't simply say they are reversing these promotions. It must be done with some dialogue. What do you think about the core idea of reversing someone's promotion?
Well, if you listen to me carefully, I had mentioned that the employer has the duty or the right to prescribe the task for a worker. So in this case, you have already promoted me, you've given me a certain responsibility to perform. Assuming that because of the severance of the agreement, those rules do not even exist. Even if they do not exist, what I'm saying is that as per industrial relations practice, as per our laws, you cannot diminish the terms and conditions of the worker. What it means is that as an employer, you can change the task of the employee. I mean, the task or responsibilities. You can change the title, but the grade on which the person is placed cannot be made worse off. What it means is that if I'm benefiting from 7,000 Ghana cedis per year, nothing happens to me that makes me get lower than that. And in fact, the law goes ahead to say that even when we have a collective bargaining agreement that makes me worse off, the law says that that collective bargaining agreement is not applicable to my situation.
What then happens to these people who are returning from PDS and also have ranks that cannot be reduced?
You know, you worked with PDS, which was a separate legal entity. So that was your employer. And now there's a seizure of that agreement. What ECG has basically done is that it has been magnanimous. It has been kind enough to resolve these people. To absolve these people. So if you have been absolved, you must know that somebody has been kind enough. When you left ECG to join PDS because you thought there was going to be better remuneration, the people who decided to be faithful to ECG stayed, out of which they were promoted based on their competence. You can no longer come and say that I used to occupy this position, I left, and now I am back, you are occupying it, give me my seat. It doesn't happen anywhere, no matter your competence. If they want to create other roles for those people based on their competence, goodwill, and the rest, that is good. But those who are occupying those roles now, you no longer will go and say that, look, take it off from this individual and give it to the newcomer. They left, so they are now newcomers.
You mentioned earlier that this is a unique situation that has not occurred before, and especially in the labor space. What are the key lessons that we can learn?
Especially in the energy sector. The key lesson for me is that we need, when we are drafting such agreements, we need to put in comprehensive provisions for how we manage some of these movements. You know, it's very, very crucial. Of course, if you look at the pact, how the segregation was going to be done, how the PDS people will go about their duties, that of ECG, hiring, and all those things were all spelled out. But the severance of it ought to have received the notice of the chief labor officer. You know, if you read the labor law, what it means that if you are going to change your process or amalgamation or emergence or technology or whatever, there's a need to inform the chief labor officer of all the people who are going to be affected 3 months before the action. So if this had been done, the chief labor officer would have come in to assess the situation. And all these things could have been handled in a different way. But of course, it has happened. That doesn't mean that once it has happened, we cannot, handle it. I'm calling on the HR people at the ECG, the MD, the management, and the rest to look into this matter and to ensure that we are not going to receive workers' agitation from that, area. Because for me, it will be needless to reverse anybody's promotion. It will be needless for workers to begin to wear red armbands to make noise here and there. It is needless.
Now, Mr. Arthur, tell us what you expect of government.
Well, it's a public corporation. When you mention government, you are taking the matter too far. This is a limited liability, entity that has a board of directors and has management. So as far as I'm concerned, I want to limit my discussions to as far as the board is concerned. But to answer your question, if anybody in government, if the energy minister is listening, these are early warning signs that they have to pick and act on it, because it can make the government unpopular. It's not everyone who goes on air to speak, but people are beginning to, I chanced on this first on social media and thought that, look, these are rights of people that we believe must be protected. And as I had mentioned earlier somewhere else, employment as far as Article 24 and 36 is concerned is part of our fundamental human rights in Ghana. So when you employ any individual, you haven't done that person a favor. It is a recognition of that individual's right. And in this regard, I think government can step in for the protection of the rights of these individuals. And they are all Ghanaians, interestingly. They are senior engineers, managers, and the rest.
Benjamin Arthur, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, these are not the only concerns of the ECG workers, those workers who remained with ECG and are welcoming them back in their fold. Do you foresee an impasse between them in the future, no matter how this is resolved?
That's a very smart question. Precisely what you have said is what is happening. When you do that, what it means is that as management, as board, you are bringing, division among your own workers. Those who had occupied those positions, let them keep on occupying their positions. Those who have come, if you are going to give them new positions, fine. If you are going to swap, then it has to be at the same level. So currently, what you have just mentioned is what I fear, that it does not have to degenerate into any, unmanageable incidents. For example, if you and I work in the same firm and we are not on talking terms, we do not agree, but we must share a common information. We are partners at the business, at the workplace. How are we expected to work together in harmony? So apart from the fact that we are all supposed to work together, our relationship is strained. It's strained because my position is threatened or is being taken away and given to you. How are you expecting me to be listening to you as my new boss? It will not work out easily. But it's easier to keep the ECG staff as seniors wherever possible and let those who out of kindness have joined listen to them to keep the harmony.
Benjamin Arthur, labor experts, thank you very much for sharing your opinion with us.
I'm very grateful.
Still live on The Pulse, and we move to other issues.